Lewis, I'm glad you're here because I have explosive news about Bernie Sanders. Remember, the backstory in New Hampshire Democratic primary polling with Bernie was it was close in New Hampshire, and then it was tied in New Hampshire, and then Bernie Sanders takes a small lead in New Hampshire and eventually a bigger lead in New Hampshire. Then we moved on to Iowa, where he was down in Iowa, but then he started pulling closer in Iowa, and then he tied Hillary Clinton in Iowa last week. And now, according to a new CBS poll, Senator Bernie Sanders is drawing 43% support in the first in the nation Iowa caucus, on top of Hillary Clinton by 10 percentage points. He has expanded his lead in New Hampshire now, drawing up to 52% support to only 30% support for Hillary Clinton. Lewis, I know, and we will talk about the problems in the other two February primaries, South Carolina and Nevada, but a 22-point lead over Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire, and now a 10-point lead over Hillary Clinton in Iowa. This is significant.
It is. I'm not sure what the Sanders campaign is doing actively to make this happen, but hey, congratulations. It seems to be working.
So, in South Carolina, another key early primary state with drastically different demographics, a far bigger African American population than New Hampshire or Iowa, Hillary Clinton is doubling Bernie Sanders, 46% compared to Bernie Sanders at 23%. So that is a factor. And then another demographic with whom Hillary Clinton is receiving sort of disproportionate support is women, and that is still the case in South Carolina. And even in Iowa, Hillary Clinton's support is still 7 points higher among Iowa men than Iowa women. This is going to get very, very interesting. On the one hand, we see the Bernie momentum is continuing in Iowa and in New Hampshire, the first two primary states, Bernie holding a now increasingly significant lead. However, remember that we have proportional appointment of delegates in New Hampshire and Iowa. So if Bernie does win 50 to 30 to some other amount for the other candidates, he is only going to be ever so marginally ahead of Hillary Clinton heading into the Nevada and South Carolina primaries. So we have to remember, Lewis, with proportional allotment of delegates, just winning the state may not necessarily do that much for you.
No, I'm hoping though that with a win in New Hampshire, let's say he wins in New Hampshire, let's say he wins in Iowa, maybe that alone will be enough to really push his name recognition forward.
Well, that's the question. In the real world, if he gets a win in Iowa and in New Hampshire, wouldn't that provide 2 to 3 weeks of significant momentum to change the dynamics of South Carolina and Nevada? Remains to be seen. On the Republican side, Donald Trump still doing well, and Ben Carson in second place. Both guys, I mean, it's a clown car, Lewis, right? I mean, can you imagine the leaders combined with about 50% support from the Republican primary electorate are Donald Trump and Ben Carson? I mean, two guys that are completely out of their minds.
The two guys that we would have said, would probably be at the bottom of the polls at this point. So what did we get wrong? I don't know. It's a total circus.
Anti-gay, bigot, retrograde Kentucky clerk Kim Davis is going back to work. She is not going to be issuing gay marriage licenses, but the gun-toting anti-government group Oath Keepers, which we've talked about before, they're saying they will use force, they will use guns, they will use whatever is necessary to prevent Kim Davis from going back to jail. I'll remind you, the Oath Keepers are described by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a fiercely anti-government militaristic group. They are getting on the ground in Kentucky. They say this is not over. Here is audio from the Oath Keepers. Take a listen to this nonsense.
So, as far as we're concerned, this is not over. And as you said, this judge needs to put on notice that his behavior is not going to be accepted. And, we'll be there to stop it and intercede ourselves if we have to.
Yeah, they're going to intercede themselves, Lewis. No, it's not a crazy medical procedure. It's just nonsense grammar. Angry men with guns are going to put the judge on notice, Lewis, about his behavior. By the way, they're pro-Constitution.
So we have a bunch of armed gunmen who are telling us that they are going to break the law
Right.
because Kim Davis is not allowed to break the law.
You need to pay really close attention to the hypocrisy here. They claim to be on the side of the Constitution and the rule of law and against anarchy and blah, blah, blah. A woman violates the law of the land because of her religion, which should be a private matter, and a judge holds her in jail in contempt following the law, right? The judge follows the law. A gun-toting group says they are going to take the side of the lawbreaker, mind you, who's not doing her job in direct violation of what the Supreme Court has decided, and they will use guns if necessary to prevent a judge from enforcing the law. But Lewis, they support the Constitution and the rule of law. It's the liberals that don't.
Yeah, there was some question as to the legitimacy of their presence in Ferguson.
That's the understatement of the year. There was some question as to the legitimacy of their presence. Yeah.
Well, hey, they said that, hey, we are here to actually keep the peace. We're here to prevent stores from being looted. We're
Right.
here to make sure that police officers aren't killed. Okay. I don't think there is any explanation they can offer here that would make their presence there seem legitimate at all.
No question about it. It is insane. And this is a perversion of logic. It's a perversion of the law. It's a perversion of the use of the Second Amendment. It's just flat out perverted. A ton of college textbooks also being purchased for the new semester. As we've talked about, highway robbery textbook prices. But if you're going to pay them, I do appreciate you using our Amazon link to do it. Everything from social work textbooks to criminal justice to mathematics books. Those books are getting insanely expensive, as we've talked about many, many times. Remember, if you ever shop on Amazon.com, stop by davidpakman.com first and click on the Amazon banner on the right side of the page. Hey, here's something interesting from leading presidential Republican candidate Donald Trump. He admitted that some of the stuff he says within the campaign is just for entertainment. Which brings up a valid question. How do you know if when Donald Trump says something, it's for entertainment or part of his campaign? He was asked about his comments that he can't imagine a candidate with Carly Fiorina's face becoming president. And here is what he ultimately said to Greta Van Susteren about that comment.
All right, Donald, I got to tell you, I do take issue with your personal comment at another candidate like that.
No, I'm talking about persona. She's had a tremendous failed business. The only reason I even bring it up is, frankly, she hit me, she attacked me, and I therefore have to respond.
The remark was about her face and not about her persona. So, but anyway, I don't want to beat a dead horse.
It all goes hand in hand. Many of those comments are made as an entertainer because I did The Apprentice. This is a woman that gets tremendous publicity, mostly on Fox, to be honest with you, and I don't know why. What can I say? I'm leading with the evangelicals. I'm leading with women.
Of course, he references when he was hosting the reality show The Apprentice, but he didn't make the comments while he was hosting The Apprentice. He made them during a campaign conversation. It was published in a Rolling Stone magazine article last week. And I'm left with the question, Lewis, which of Donald Trump's comments are made as a candidate and which comments are made as an entertainer? Like, for example, when he reiterated that Rosie O'Donnell was a fat pig during a debate, should we assume that that was a campaign comment because it was a debate? Or should we assume that that was a comment just for entertainment?
I don't think that there's a distinction here. I think it's all one and the same.
So you don't buy this explanation?
In a way I do, because he is an entertainer. And even when he's on the campaign trail, he's trying to entertain people. And I think that's part of his success, if what you can call this is success, being ahead in the polls. So I think, I think he's constantly in entertainment mode and campaign mode.
Is his plan, his laughably ridiculous plan of building a huge wall between the U.S. and Mexico for entertainment purposes only? Or is that a candidate idea? And the best part about this is, right, just about everybody other than the 30-ish% of Republicans who currently say they support him in polls, most people obviously can tell that this entire candidacy is a total sideshow, right? They realize, like we do, that it's a total joke of a presidential campaign. the people who support him, they don't seem to care that half or more of the stuff he says should have a little disclaimer at the bottom that says these ideas are not real ideas. They're for entertainment purposes only. His supporters are eating it all up.
Well, I mean, I've kind of thrown out the idea that our elections are a joke and that our government is a joke. And so is it that outrageous to have a candidate that's also a complete joke? Let's make it all one big joke and have Donald Trump be our president.
Yeah,
right?
You're right, except I don't really like the idea of a sort of insult comic entertainer being president of the United States. Call me crazy, Lewis. Maybe I lack a sense of humor, but that doesn't appeal to me.
I don't think it'll be good for the country, but I think it will be good for the history books. And I think it'll be good for our program.
Donald Trump is the representation, a microcosm, the epitome of what the world dislikes about the United States of America. That's a very harsh reality that the Trump lovers, at some point, Lewis, I think are going to have to admit.
I don't think they have to admit anything, David. Denial is a powerful human trait.
Hey, I've got some of the creepiest stuff going on by Donald Trump here to play for you. And I'm kind of distraught by the entire thing because it's so sick. Donald Trump has made a number of really strange comments about his 33-year-old daughter, Ivanka Trump, over the last several years. And he seems to have no plan of changing that now that he's running for president. The Rolling Stone article that came out last week referencing an interview with Donald Trump read Trump saying about his daughter, yeah, she's really something. And what a beauty, that one. If I weren't happily married and, her father, ... sort of saying Trump would be interested in dating and having sex with his own daughter if it weren't for the fact that she's his daughter. And Ring of Fire started looking into whether this is an isolated, completely bizarre comment from Donald Trump or whether there's a long track record of it. And as it turns out, Lewis, there's a long track record of it. Here's Donald Trump appearing with his daughter on The View a few years ago. Take a listen to this.
So, Donald, all right, I'm afraid to ask this question, but what would you do? Playboy put Ivanka on the cover of the magazine and she had not...
This is going to be an interesting answer.
He doesn't even want you to have a drink. I know him. So
it would be really disappointing. Not really, but it would depend on what was inside the magazine.
If she posed, it would be fine. But if they put her picture on...
Yeah, but it depends on what goes inside the magazine.
Well, see, that's her gripe. That's this girl's gripe.
And
people assume there'll be nude photos.
Right, you do assume that with
Misleading.
Playboy.
Okay,
But if there weren't, you wouldn't have an issue with it then. If they were using her to...
I don't think Ivanka would do that inside the magazine, although she does have a very nice figure. I've said that if Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her.
Stop it! Oh, it's so weird. Stop.
You know what?
Ugh, I mean, it's just, this is setting off creepy alarms left and right, Lewis. And then back in 2003, when he was on the Howard Stern show, again, Donald Trump seemingly drooling over his own daughter's great body that he's obsessed with. Take a listen to this.
You know who's one of the great beauties of the world, according to everybody, and I helped create her? Who? Ivanka. My daughter, Ivanka.
Yeah.
She's 6 feet tall. She's got the best body.
Yeah, she's hot.
She made a lot of money as a model, a tremendous amount, and then she went cold turkey and gave it all up because she had to go to college, because I wanted her to go to college. She goes to the best college.
Wharton.
She goes to Wharton. She's got straight A's.
Yeah, her straight A's. She just has, Lewis, it's the best body. His daughter has the best body. This is just straight up creep central. There's a huge difference, Lewis. Like if, let's say, Lewis, you accidentally had a kid and you love the kid, right? Things work out well the way we would like. You love the kid. It's a daughter. It would be perfectly reasonable to say, my daughter is very beautiful. I have a beautiful daughter. Rather than, if I were a single man, I'd be pursuing my daughter because of her great body and her height. It's just, she's stunning. And I would consider being with her sexually if I were single and she wasn't my daughter. There's a huge difference between A and B there.
Yeah, there's a reason why nobody says those things. And to say them as a presidential candidate is, well, I think a really, really bad decision. That being said, do I think it's going to impact his campaign? No.
Listen, Lewis, if Donald Trump's campaign with the Republican base is not going to be impacted by the fact that he cheated on one wife with another wife, the entire thing, by the fact that he is completely living the opposite of the values that he claims to espouse. If they're not going to drop him for that, I quite frankly don't think that him finding his daughter incredibly attractive is going to turn off that many of those voters if they've already gotten past the stuff he's already said and done.
Not at all. I mean, for us, this is something we can look at and say, whoa, Donald Trump is even more nuts than we thought. but if you've already decided that you're backing this candidate, I don't really think there's anything he can say that's going to deter you.
So let me see if I understand. You're backing the guy who thinks his own daughter is super hot and would date her, right? Yeah, that's the guy I'm backing. But it's really all over how he would deal with China.
China or Mexico?
Both, I guess. He certainly commented about both. So there it is. Donald Trump, very, very attracted to his own daughter. And oh, what he would do to her, Lewis, if she simply were not his daughter. Let's take a break. After the break, I will speak to Matthew Golombek, a fellow University of Massachusetts graduate who now works for the great Jet Propulsion Laboratory of NASA. He will talk to us. No Fantasyland stuff, Lewis. Where do we need to land on Mars? Not if, but when we go, as Matthew Golombek says. Stay with us. It's Monday. What a program we have today. One of the most interesting individual little stories from these early days of the 2016 presidential campaign happened yesterday. Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders spoke at the private Christian college, Liberty University. This is the traditionally far-right religious school. It's in Lynchburg, Virginia. It was founded by the extremist televangelist and pastor Jerry Falwell. This is a perfect speaking gig for candidates like Rick Santorum or Ben Carson, for Ted Cruz. Remember, everybody, all the student body being forced to go to the mandatory rally for Ted Cruz. Not really a great fit for the more moderate Republicans, and really not a good fit, you would think, for one of the most progressive candidates in a long time, Bernie Sanders. But Bernie Sanders spoke there yesterday. He was asked a question about protecting unborn children, and the entire exchange is absolutely, endlessly fascinating, Lewis. The question was about protecting the unborn. Two things to pay attention to. Number one, pay attention to the raucous standing ovation and applause for the anti-abortion, anti-choice language that was used by David Nasser, the house pastor, or whatever he's called at Liberty University, in framing the question. But then, interestingly, pay attention to the reaction to Bernie Sanders' answer to the question. Let's look.
Senator Sanders, you've talked in your campaign about how it is immoral to protect the billionaire class at the expense of our most vulnerable in society, obviously children. You just mentioned that even in your talk with us earlier. A majority of Christians would agree with you, but here's the question. A majority of Christians would agree with you, but would also go further and say that children in the womb need our protection even more. How do you reconcile So the question, sir, is obviously you can see this is what they want to ask. Well, this is what's on there. How do you reconcile the two? And again, I know that you have a different view. I know that you, sir, and I don't have to be eye to eye on it, but I sense a real sincerity in you in wanting to see our children protected. Can you see, sir, how we see the child in the womb as the most vulnerable that needs protection?
I do understand.
Yes, sir.
But I do also understand, I understand this is an area where we disagree. I do understand and I do believe that it is improper for the United States government or state government to tell every woman in this country the very painful and difficult choice that she has to make on that issue. And I honestly don't want to be too provocative here, but very often conservatives say, you know, get the government out of my life. I don't want the government telling me what to do. But on this very sensitive issue of which this nation is divided, a lot of people agree with you, a lot of people agree with me. But my view is, I respect absolutely a family that says, no, we are not going to have an abortion. I understand that. I respect that. But I would hope that other people respect the very painful and difficult choice that many women feel they have to make and don't want the government telling them what they have to do.
This clip really shows me what is refreshing about Bernie Sanders. There's nothing that feels crafted or concocted about his answer. It's just his honest view. It should and does appeal to at least some people on both sides. And there was more applause than I would have anticipated for Bernie Sanders speaking at Liberty University.
There was. He wasn't afraid to say that we differ on this issue. And I wonder how many people were actually enlightened when he started bringing up, things about the Republican budget and its lack of morality. But there did seem to be a fair amount of applause even for that. And so, I'm hoping that he has a bunch of supporters in that crowd.
Even the politicians that would be more on the side of the Liberty University crowd, when they're asked questions, they sort of hem and haw and waffle and speak in generalities and talking points. Bernie Sanders stands by his convictions. He explains why these are his convictions. These are the exact same things he says in front of liberal audiences. And he got some cheers for it. This was not ever going to be his crowd, but he gives the same message that he gives to a liberal crowd, and it does to some degree resonate. And this is just further confirmation that the Bernie policies are not fringe extremist ideas. These are the popular mainstream policies. It's just that they get all wrapped up in names like communism and socialism and blah, blah, blah. And that is just a distraction because these are pretty reasonable middle of the road ideas that Bernie Sanders is presenting.
And if people need to keep sharing videos of Bernie Sanders and the Bernie Sanders meme quotes, because that's really how you get this message across. I mean, Dave, imagine if we didn't have social media right now. What would Bernie's name recognition look like without all of that?
Yeah, it'd be even lower than it currently is. And we'll continue to track where that goes. Fascinating. Bernie slaying at Liberty University. Not a headline we would have anticipated. Let's take a quick break. So much to get to on today's show. Let's talk about the Miss America pageant. This is so funny. Miss Alabama, Meg McGuffin, was asked what she believes is going on with Donald Trump leading the Republican primary race. I'm going to play the audio for you. I'd play the video, but from my recollection, Miss America and Miss USA are super aggressive with their copyright claims, and we don't want to get into trouble. So I'm going to play the audio of Meg McGuffin ripping Trump a new one, and she says something that's really curious during this segment. Let's take a listen to it.
Okay, Tara, Kylie. Hey. According to a poll released this week, Donald Trump is leading Republican candidates by 32% of the votes.
Right.
Why do you think he's leading by such an overwhelming margin?
I think Donald Trump is an entertainer, and I think he says what's on a lot of people's minds, but I think that the Republican Party should be absolutely terrified of all the attention that he is taking from incredible candidates like Jeb Bush and Chris Christie, who could absolutely do the job of President of the United States. And if I were a Republican, I would absolutely be terrified of that. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it's great that she points out that this is an absolute joke, that Trump is an entertainer, and that Republicans should be terrified. There's this funny thing where she goes, the incredible candidates like Jeb Bush and Chris Christie aren't getting enough attention. And if I were a Republican, I would be terrified. I've not heard any non-Republicans, Lewis, praise Jeb Bush and Chris Christie as incredibly good candidates.
Yeah. And I guess maybe compared to Trump, they are incredible candidates, but overall, they are not. And so sounds like she is a Republican.
Very different, though, than Miss South Carolina in the Miss USA pageant, right? Asked about people not having maps or not being able to find the U.S. or Iraq on a map. And she talked about, lots of people don't have maps, including everywhere like such as the Iraq. This is a very different response, much more conviction, much more fluidity, but still some elements of craziness in the answer.
Well, mild craziness. And that Miss South Carolina was Miss Teen USA.
Right.
So here we have someone in the pageant that has had a few more years to master the English language.
I told you yesterday that bigot Kentucky County Clerk Kim Davis was heading back to work, but she would not be issuing same-sex marriage licenses, but she would not be getting in the way of her employees issuing same-sex marriage licenses, but blah, 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 blah. We know the whole story. Well, we have video of a couple that actually went in on Kim Davis's first day back at work and was able to obtain a marriage license with her present, albeit not from her. This is the local couple, Shannon and Carmen Wampler Collins, who walked through a sea of supporters of Kim Davis. I mean, think about how depraved the situation is, where a bigoted woman who is just breaking the law has supporters show up at her work who seemingly have nothing better to do, or maybe don't work or are independently wealthy, who knows. And they just cheer her on. They're supporting her breaking of the law. Okay. They walked into the Rowan County Courthouse. They waited in line to apply for their marriage license. Brian Mason, who we have now heard of many times, he's the one who married another couple, David Ermold and David Moore, who were initially rejected by Kim Davis. We interviewed David Ermold last week. He is the one who provided the marriage license to the same-sex couple. The couple met 23 years ago at Smith College, Lewis, where my mom is and has been a professor for a long time. Here is video. The remarkable part is not that Brian Mason is following the law, Lewis. Brian Mason is no hero. He's just doing his job. The remarkable part is that you will hear in the background screams about sin and homosexual sodomy as this couple is merely taking advantage of something prescribed by law to all, the ability to get a marriage certificate. But there is a crowd of people yelling about homosexual sodomy. Take a listen to this.
You can't get back and you get it. You only have a day.
Will you show us the license when you get it?
To turn and trust God. Miss Kim Davis is trying to help.
We're going to get outside first.
Yeah.
Just show them with the big kiss.
Shannon, what's your middle name?
Oh, Shannon.
Give your heart to God. Don't be afraid. It's your sin that brought you here. Your sin is going to be your demise and separate you from God. And because he loves you, he's calling you to himself today. It tells us in the scripture that God wants the craving of the wicked. What you long for, you can't satisfy yourself. Only God can satisfy you. And this is Jesus, who is calling you to himself.
Hey, how sad and worthless is your life if you spend your day hanging out at a county clerk's office, shouting harassment at people getting married? What is going on in your life, Lewis, if that's what it's come to?
I guess that's your calling. Maybe that's their mission in life. And I guess if you can attach some meaning to your life, that's a good thing. But when it manifests in this way, it really is pretty pathetic.
How on earth are they even allowed to be in the county clerk's office behaving like this? Isn't there some simple rule? I mean, they have police officers in there. If you start screaming, you're asked whether you actually have business in the office. And when the answer is no, you're asked to leave. I mean, what on earth are they even doing there? But what is most striking to me is that these so-called loving, compassionate Christians, messengers of the gospel of Jesus Christ, are showing their true colors, which is that they are vicious hate mongers. They are the equivalent of the high school locker room towel snappers and bullies, taking time out of their day just to harass other people.
Yes, and it's, I say that the world would be a much better place without religion. It would be one less thing for people to get confused about, and it really is just a source of confusion.
We've talked about the possibility of sex robots in the future. We've talked about some of the technological aspects. We've talked about some of the sort of psychological and emotional elements of it. And the BBC is now reporting that a campaign has been launched calling for a ban on the development of robots that can be used for sex. Dr. Kathleen Richardson, who's leading the campaign, says that they are both unnecessary and undesirable. She's a robot ethicist in Leicester. She wants to raise awareness of the issue and persuade everybody who's thinking about making sex robots to think otherwise. She says, quote, sex robots seem to be a growing focus in the robotics industry, and the models that they draw on, how they will look, what roles they would play, are very disturbing indeed. She goes further to say that she thinks traditional stereotypes of women will be reinforced by sex robots and that it will be detrimental to relationships between men and women. This is starting to happen. Abyss Creations, which sells sex toys, is starting to introduce electronics, and the sort of logical next step would be sex robots. True Companion says it is developing the world's first sex robot. They say it will launch the first sex doll later this year. And Dr. Kevin Curran, who's a senior member of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, says these products are going to become mass market pretty soon. I think, Lewis, that it is ironic and absurd that in the midst of concerns about drone technology, unmanned aerial vehicles that can kill huge swaths of people with the push of a button by someone thousands of miles away, the idea of using robots for war, where you have robots fighting other robots on the battlefield, sex robots should be pretty low on the list of concerns.
And don't forget about AIs that will take over the world, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a whole sort of another level. And we've talked to AI experts about that. But yeah, if you believe that, that should also, you would imagine, be a higher concern than sex robots. And it seems to me like a complete waste of time. I don't disagree that sex robots could impact a relationship in the same way that sex toys can already impact a relationship, or pornography can already impact a relationship. But where is the line, right? If you are going to say merely because of what might happen as the result of people using sex robots, not illegal, nobody is being forced into doing anything, right? Individuals deciding for themselves, do I want a sex robot? What about banning sex toys as well, Lewis? I mean, those could also have an impact on relationships. I see this as a very sort of authoritarian, slippery slope, and I think we have far greater fish to fry when it comes to robotic technology in society.
Yeah, if these researchers are worried about what might happen with relationships and procreation and all of that, look what's happening in Japan, and try to make sure that that doesn't happen here or in other countries. And don't worry about sex robots. It's so absurd.